Picking up where we left off in the last video, I want to go ahead now and look at the Isimple plus translucency. It's going to be different from the Isimple plus volume, and the reason why is because you can use this on geometry that has holes in it, or if it's just a single plane. But it gives a very similar result to the subsurface scattering that we saw with the Isimple plus volume. So I'm going to go ahead and double click that to load that onto my surfaces, and you can see there it is over here. And the idea is that we're going to be getting the same parameters, the metallicity, the base color, and then you can see down here we have translucency weight. Now the idea of translucency weight is that there is no translucency until we increase the translucency weight. However, the translucency weight is basically the mixture between the base color and the translucency, meaning that our regular type of diffuse surface is going to be mixed with some translucency based on the position of the slider. A value of 1 is going to be 100% translucency, whereas a value of 0.5 is going to be half of the diffuse and then half of the translucency, which I find is a pretty good balance. The other thing that's important to know is that if you have any metallicity, it's going to completely negate the translucency in those areas. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to set the translucency weight to 0.5, which is halfway between diffuse and translucent, so it's sort of a mixture. And then we have the option here of the base color effect. You can see we can have the base color, which is the diffuse, to be scatter only, scatter plus transmit, or scatter transmit intensity. For most purposes, I find the scatter transmit is going to be the appropriate effect for translucency. However, you can try them all in order to get the best material results that you might want. And then down here, we have the translucency color. If you have a texture loaded here, then you want to set the translucency color to a value of 1, or that would be RGB of 255. However, if you're using this as a raw color, then my advice is to set this to be somewhere near the middle. So I'm going to set this to be an RGB value of 128. And then I'm just going to go ahead and set the saturation to something like, say, maybe 80. And that's going to be a reddish color. And I'm going to say OK. So the idea here is that we have this very, very subdued translucency. And the reason why is because a value of 1, or RGB 255, is going to be 100% translucent. This can create lots of problems in your renders. Now, the only time that you would want to use this is in very, very, very special circumstances. However, for this particular shader, it's best to keep the translucency color near a value of 128 and then just saturate it or set the hue to be whatever it is that you want and just keep it fairly dark. You don't want it too bright, you don't want it too dark. Somewhere in the middle is usually going to give you the best results. We'll come back to the SSS reflectance tint, but because I have a translucency color here of this sort of red color, I'm going to set my base color to be something in that same range. So I'm going to set my base color to be something like this red right here. So that we're going to have a fairly dark red, and then we're going to have some translucency. And then below this, we have lobe 1 roughness and we have lobe 2 roughness. This is for our specular. And the idea here is that we're going to be controlling the ratio between these two roughnesses using the specular ratio here for the dual lobe. So the idea here is that right now we're using 85% of lobe 1 and only 15% of lobe 2. So right now, this is set to a lobe 1 roughness of 0.5, which is going to be 50% roughness, and a lobe 2 roughness of 0.05, which is going to be 5% roughness. So what we're going to see is 15% at 5, and then 85% at 50%. So we're going to be getting a blend between two different roughnesses. Now, it's important to note that any metallic area in this particular object is going to be using only the lobe 1 roughness. And the reason why is because metallicity does not respect this dual lobe approach. So again, if you're going to be using metallic in any area, make sure that you set the lobe 1 roughness for the roughness that you want the metallic areas to be, and then you can adjust the ratio and the lobe 2 roughness to get the results that you want for everything else. Aside from that, this is basically the same as what we would get with any other settings. We have a normal map and then everything else down below. So I'm just going to quickly come over here and render this so that you can see what we're going to be getting as far as our translucency weight of 0.5 and our translucency color here. And you can see that we're getting some translucency, as you can see with this particular object. And we could set that translucency to be any kind of variation on this that we want. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit cancel. And I'm going to say yes, that I want to cancel this. And I'm just going to go ahead and move this over. And again, it bounces over. I don't know why. And then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to change the hue on this. So I'm just going to go ahead and change the hue up to be maybe something a bit more on the yellowish side. And I'm going to say OK. I'm going to render again. And I want you to see how this is going to modify the results that we're getting in terms of the base color because, again, it's a blend between the two. So we're getting the translucency color, particularly in areas where the light is shining through, and then we're going to be getting the base color, and it's going to blend the two. And it's controlling that blend by the translucency weight as well as the base color effect. So as you change those two parameters, you're going to be getting different colors because it's going to be blending these two together. Now that said, let me just hit cancel on this and say yes. And let me just go ahead and show you what those two look side by side. So that's with the more reddish translucency color, and this is with the more yellowish translucency color. So you can see how much of an impact this has even at a translucency weight of 0.5. I'm gonna go ahead and close those two guys out. The SSS reflectance tint, the idea of this is that this is going to tint the areas that are going to be reflective, meaning the parts that are not necessarily going to be showing the translucency. So if I come over here and I click this, what's important to know is that you really don't want to change the value from 255, and you do not want the saturation to be very high. So if we're going to do anything, we're probably going to want to keep the saturation somewhere around, say, 20. And here you're going to see that I get a very slight red. So if I wanted to scatter that color to be more towards blue, then what I could do is I could set it to be more towards blue, say, okay, this is a very light color still. We do not want this to be dark. We want it to be very light. We want the saturation to be very low because this is a very strong effect. But what's going to happen is it's going to add some blue to that red in the area where the scattering is occurring. So I'm going to go ahead and render that, and you'll see pretty clearly what I'm talking about once this begins to render. So there we go. So you can see that we're going to be getting some of that blue into the scattering. And again, this is a very strong effect, so we do not want to overuse it. However, if this isn't strong enough, then what you can do is you can hit cancel, say yes, and you could always increase. And I don't know why I have to do that twice every time. You could always come over here and you could increase your saturation. And here I'll do something really obvious like say 80. So this is really strong. And I'll do the render again, and you'll see how much this can really impact things. So you don't want to use a super saturated color. So there it is right there. You can see everything is being shifted more towards blue. And as a result, the red is really being toned down quite significantly. So I'm going to hit cancel on this, say yes, and then I'm just going to go ahead and compare. And you can see how this one is going to be significantly cooler, and we're losing a lot of the red compared to what we had here. And again, even if I just come over here and I just move this one off to the side, and I set this back to white, and say okay, and then I go ahead and I render, you'll see that red come back in full force because the reflectance tint of blue is gone, and we're going to be just comparing the red to itself. We're not going to be tinting it towards blue, which is going to be negating a lot of that warmness. So you can see this is much warmer, this is much cooler. So the idea of the SSS reflectance tint is that it's going to have a pretty strong effect, particularly on what comes out of your base color. So you do not want to get real saturated with it. And it's just useful in terms of maybe toning down the overall tint of the scattering areas of your surface. So I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel and say yes. And you can see pretty clearly the difference in color here. This is much warmer, more red because we did not have any SSS reflectance tint, whereas this is going to be more towards black because the cooler value of the SSS reflectance tint is going to pull away some of that warmness from the red. And that's basically the purpose of that. I don't use it very often, however, it can be useful in those particular instances. Now that said, if you wanted to have more of the base color, then you just reduce the translucency weight. If you wanted to have less of the base color and more of the translucency color, then you just increase the translucency weight. And again, you'll see how that works out as soon as we render. So this will become more of the translucency color, it'll be less of the base color, and you can see how that blend is controlled. Now again, like I say, if you wanted to see how the different blending is going to occur, then what you would want to do is you want to come over here and try all of them. Now, for my purposes, like I said, the scatter transmit is probably the one I would use most often. However, it can be a little dark. If we choose the scatter transmit intensity, it's going to look a lot like the scatter only. However, it's going to keep the saturation a little bit better. And this could be better sometimes in case you're looking for a more colorful result. So you'll see what I mean in just one second. Once this renders, you'll see this is more colorful. If I bring back the other guy, you can see this is a bit duller. So if you're looking for more colorful results, then the scatter plus transmit intensity can be a good option for that. However, I find that if you're using a really saturated base color or a really saturated translucency color, then sometimes this can create problems because it can be too saturated. So it's just a matter of whatever colors you're using, picking the appropriate base color effect and the translucency weight in order to get the effect that you want. Now, again, it's important to remember that this is meant for geometry that has holes in it. This is meant for geometry that is a single polygon. So things like leaves, things like grass, things like lampshades, and even in certain circumstances, you could use it for certain types of skins if there's holes in the skin or something that makes sense for skins in that particular case. However, there should be a dedicated skin shader that I'll be releasing at a later point in the year that's going to be more built for the purpose of creating skins in iRay. And so if you're looking to create figures in iRay, which is a very specialty task, I'll be releasing a separate product for that. However, if you're looking for creating single-sided subsurface scattering effects for things like lampshades, grass, or leaves, then this is an excellent shader for those purposes. Now I'm just going to go ahead and hit cancel, and I'm going to say yes to cancel that. The other thing that you should know about this single-sided subsurface scattering that this particular shader provides is that it's going to be much, much faster than what we get with the volume. So as a result, if you're looking for a quick and dirty subsurface scattering effect and you don't want to pay a big render penalty, don't use the volume, use the translucency. I hope you enjoy these products. I hope you find them helpful in terms of setting up your own products. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them under the videos.